Welcome back to On Texas Football for a special edition, weekend edition, talking NFL draft stocks, where they're going right now. Most specifically, Quinn Ewers, Jayden Blue. We're going to dive into both of them real quick. I'm CJ Vogel, joined by Gerry Hamilton. Of course, we're going to be talking a little bit about where these guys are sitting right now as we enter Week 10. Texas is on a bye, so we get to sit back, relax, watch the rest of the college football world and what all entails, how kind of plays itself out this weekend. But that doesn't stop us from looking ahead to the 2025 NFL draft. And that's a lot of conversation that we've seen in the chat. We've seen on the message boards over at On Texas Football as well. Yep. Where's Quinn Ewers? Where's Jayden Blue? How do these guys stack up in terms of their position in the 2025 NFL draft? We're going to start with Quinn Ewers here because that was kind of the belle of the ball coming into the year, right? Quinn, a former five-star caliber guy. I mean, he was expected to take that leap, be one of the top players in all the country, and we're sitting here Week 10 saying, I don't know if I've seen that so far. And Gerry, I'll toss it to you because this is expected to be the Quinn Ewers that was going to elevate this Texas team, and right now it feels like he's more along for the ride than the guy leading the way.
Yeah, I think what's interesting with Quinn in the NFL draft, and I know a lot of Texas fans say, we don't care, we care about the season. But, again, these questions are asked a lot on Coffee and Football, our live streams on ontexasfootball.com. So we're addressing it. With Quinn, here's what Quinn has going for him. The 2025 NFL draft at quarterback is not strong. It is not on the surface. Now, that can change when the workouts begin for some of these guys after and when we see who declares after the season. But right now, on the surface, not a good quarterback class, so that really favors for Quinn right now, who's not having his senior year or fourth year expected. Last year's draft at quarterback was a different story. I mean, but this draft, you have Cam Ward. You have Shedeur Sanders. Those are the guys that are getting the most run right now. Quinn's third. Carson Beck is in that group, CJ. But I'll say this. Headed into the season, it was Carson Beck, probably, as some people were talking about, the first pick overall. Then there was Quinn. Then there was Shedeur. Cam Ward really wasn't in that lead group at the time. But as the season's played out, it just, to me, doesn't feel like Quinn, and I'll say this for Carson Beck, I don't think either one of those guys, as far as on the field play, is that of a first-round pick. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get pushed up the board, because quarterbacks get pushed up the board every draft because there's such a need at that position. So there's guys going in the first round that probably don't have first-round grades if you really honestly talk to NFL teams about it. So it'll be interesting to see. But, CJ, on Quinn, I'm thinking right now, day 2 pick anywhere in the second round, third round, really depending on these last 4 games. I think A&M, I think all the games are big for Quinn, but I think A&M is a big game for Quinn because Georgia, he played under duress the entire game, and that's every week in the NFL. So what are you going to do at Texas A&M in an opportunity against a big-time defensive line that's going to force you to play under duress?
I'm with you 100%. If I had to pinpoint a little bit about where Quinn goes, it's anywhere from 50 to 80 in the NFL draft. It's kind of in that slot range, and that's a back end of the second round to early third round pick. Again, that's not to say that he can't move his way up.
Right.
And that's where I'll toss it to you here next, Gerry, is how can he move his way up? Is it just playing under duress? Is it just playing under pressure a little bit better? Because that's one thing that I think I look at when it comes to first round quarterbacks. How can they put the game on their shoulders and take over? For Quinn, I don't know if we've seen that this year. Against Michigan, I think we did, right? He was able to maneuver through the pocket. He moved up. He moved outside. He threw on the run as well as we've ever seen him. That's disappeared. That's not necessarily been a consistency in his game. But for you to be a first-round NFL quarterback, you've got to be able to have that week in and week out. And you've got to be able to elevate your play whenever the tables are even. The defense has a lot of talent. That's not been the case so far for Quinn.
Yeah, so Quinn's strength, which we'll get to in a second, why I think he does have a chance to move up after the season is over, more so maybe than the last 4 games of the season, regular season. But Quinn is not the one thing the guys in the NFL do is it doesn't matter what you run in the 40 or your shuttle or your L cone to a certain extent, the testing numbers of an athlete. But it matters your body quickness and reactive quickness to things moving around your peripheral constantly. You have to be able to play with athleticism, react with athleticism in the pocket. If you can't, the NFL is a very difficult game. I mean, very difficult game, because that Georgia game, that's every week in the NFL. So here's what Quinn can do, because that's not going to be his strength. So where Quinn, I think, has to maximize to move up the draft boards. And I'm not sure if it's during the season. If the during the season part, I would say, is at Arkansas somewhat, but and Kentucky's got some NFL guys up the middle, but it's not the same as Georgia. At A&M, road game, defensive front with 5-6 future NFL draft picks on it that made life hell for Garrett Nussmeier recently. Okay, he played under duress the whole game. Nussmeier's a little better athlete than Quinn in those situations. That reactive body quickness, he's a little more reactive than Quinn is. So Quinn has to play really well against A&M, in my opinion. That because the NFL's they're looking for something coming off the Oklahoma and Georgia games against two teams that had NFL pass rushers, NFL linebackers, front sevens. So what's it going to be? It's A&M. That's going to be a big game for his draft status. I really believe, to kind of rebound from the two shaky games that NFL scouts did not. There's no way they like that. But then when you get past the season, CJ, you were at the pro day last year for the Texas players, for Adonai Mitchell, the receivers, all those guys. In that setting, Quinn Ewers is money.
Yep.
He is tremendous. When you just put him out there and you're running routes on air, man, and he is as good as it gets. He looks like a 1-1 guy every time he's in that scenario. So then the NFL is going to have to balance the game versus the workouts. And I do think the workouts and the interviews with him will help elevate him. The other thing he's got that's hurting him, though, injury history now. It's 3 straight years in college. He had the hernia injury in high school. He's had some bad luck injuries. He got popped. I mean, that should have been a flag, obviously, on Dallas Turner in the Bama game. That would hurt about anybody, right? The diving just drilled you through the ground type of injury. But he's had bad injury luck, okay? And that's just a reality for him, and that does affect your draft status. So, CJ, how important do you think it is the last 4 games of the season versus the individual workouts or the pro days with teams? I think it's be interesting to see how that's weighed with Quinn Ewers.
It will be interesting. And for me with Quinn is, you're a third-year quarterback right now. These final 4 games have to be ones in which, again, you don't have to be the best player on the field, but you have to at least look at it in the sense that you're in control of everything that happens on the field. Offensively, again, I thought that we saw it at times against Vanderbilt. Those 2 interceptions, whatever. But 17 straight completions, that's what you want to see, right? Yep. That's kind of the run that you hope to see with a third-year starting quarterback in the same system, a guy that you hope to be in the first round, a day 2 pick at the latest. That's what you want. But you got to see that for a full game. You didn't see that in the second half all too much. You did see 2 of his best throws climbing the pocket late in that game, but it's got to be more consistent. And I think that's what's going to happen whenever you go on the road to Fayetteville, when you go on the road to College Station. That's going to be – I mean, that's a tough place to play. 2 tough environments. So to your point about what can he do against tough competition on the road where things aren't going your way, those are going to be games that they look at because, listen, he did it against Michigan when he went up to Ann Arbor. I thought that was the best game that he had played individually.
Yes, no doubt.
But no doubt. You take a step back against Oklahoma. You come back, you don't look great against Georgia. You look really bad against Georgia.
Well, TJ, he needs to make a lasting memory.
That's it.
For NFL scouts to get at A&M. Because the one lasting memory that NFL personnel have right now is Steve Sarkisian had to pull him against Georgia.
Yes.
That is not the lasting memory you want headed into the NFL draft and the biggest game, most impactful game you've played.
No one cares that you threw for 194 and 2 scores in the second half. That doesn't matter. You know, and that game was out of reach. It doesn't weigh the same as it would in a normal instance, to your point, because you got yanked. Let's put it that way. Real quick before we move on, this isn't a great quarterback class.
Right.
But there are still some quarterbacks that can make life very difficult in the sense of where Quinn goes in this draft. Shedeur Sanders, Carson Beck, Jalen Milroe, Garrett Nussmeier's in the conversation, Cam Ward. How do you see that shaking out right now in terms of Quinn's kind of standing right now holistically amongst these other quarterbacks in the class?
I think Shedeur Sanders is probably in the best spot.
He's my number one quarterback.
Yeah, he's in the best spot. Cam Ward, I still think, has some turnover issues that I think the NFL – there's a reason Cam Ward came back to college because he had to. I mean, I think he's very talented and a tremendous playmaker, but I still think there's some ball security issues, some turnover issues with him. Maybe in the he likes to play in the sand lot maybe too much versus in the pocket for the NFL. So we'll see how that goes. It's really going to be interesting with Carson Beck because Carson Beck statistically, and if you watch games, has not had a first-round pick season. He didn't look like a first-round pick against Texas. I'm not even sure he looked like a second or third-round pick in that game either if Quinn didn't, right? Then you have the sleepers. You have Garrett Nussmeier, who, look, he's got 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions his first year starting. He is a gunslinger, so he'll take some risks with the ball. But, man, that guy plays under duress. He still is out there trying to make plays for his team. I think he's going to be attractive to the NFL guys, and I think his workouts, because of who he is, obviously being brought up in a quarterback family with his father, I think he's going to – if he comes out this year, and I'm not saying he is, if he does, that's going to muddy the water for Quinn and Carson Beck because he's going to be dialed in workouts. And then you have a couple of the sleepers like a Drew Lar, right, who's not going to athletically really do much for people, but he's a big guy. He's got a strong arm. Now we'll see what he does the rest of the way on the schedule. Then you have a sleeper. A sleeper is a Riley Leonard at Notre Dame. CJ, like I was very high on him this to start the season. He hasn't had the season I expected, especially early. But he gets a David Cutcliffe bump. All those guys do that were recruited by David Cutcliffe, and he is a really good athlete and a really intelligent player. So you have a couple of guys like that. What about a Curtis Rourke from Indiana? Did somebody come out of nowhere that was a really good player at Miami of Ohio? Now he's at Indiana. And the NFL scouts are like, wow, this guy is, I know he was injured, but he was, he's leading Indiana to places they've never been. So what does he look like? So there's a couple of sleepers out there that once the workouts begin, I think have a chance to move up in the eyes of the NFL scouts. But I think right now Shedeur is 1, Cam Ward is probably 2. And then you get to Quinn and Carson Beck. And I don't think either ones look like a first-round pick this season. I just don't.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And it's, again, 4 opportunities and then some to kind of turn the tides if you're Quinn Ewers. Again, because we've seen the talent. We've seen the high moments. And
yes,
when Quinn's rolling, I would argue there's hard to find another quarterback in the country that can do what he does, right? It's just getting back to where that was, right? Michigan was a great moment, but that's long gone. That's in the rearview mirror, and that's several lanes behind you right now. So getting back to where that was is going to be key for Quinn because right now, again, middle of the second round, early third, that's kind of where we're sitting right now. I was sitting next to a couple scouts in the press box against Vanderbilt, and those interceptions, it was just the message was bad luck is what I was hearing and kind of talking with there. Bad luck's going to happen in the game of quarterback. How do you in the game of football and especially at quarterback? But how do you respond? That's going to be up to Quinn these next 4 games to kind of get back to where he was.
He needs to have that lasting snapshot against Texas A&M because again, the hard thing, the thing he's got to overcome right now, Steve Sarkisian had to pull him against Georgia, a third-year starting quarterback, in the most impactful, not biggest, the most impactful game of his career with every NFL team there. That's what he's got to overcome that snapshot because that's not a good one for him right now.
Absolutely. And before we move to Jayden Blue, because I know that's another topic we wanted to touch on real quick, just final thoughts. Is first round still on the table for Quinn?
It's on the table because I think his workouts are going to be so impressive. But I will say this, his last 4 games are going to be huge in that regard. They're going to be key. They're going to be key because he needs to play at the Michigan level a couple of these games coming home for me. If he does, then he's positioned himself to go crush the individual workouts, the pro day workouts, the interviews, that whole process. Because quarterbacks do get pushed up the draft board. if he plays inconsistently the last 4 games, with 2 of them being road games and hostile road games against 2 rivals that are going to be way, way jacked up for Texas. If he plays inconsistent in the last 4, it gets to be tougher for him.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's going to be really interesting to see how he bounces back. But on top of Quinn, that backfield also has another player that's looking to, boost some draft stock, because it's not where I think many expected it to be right now, and that's Jayden Blue. Of course, Texas has had the first running back taken in the last 2 NFL drafts, right? Bijan a couple of years ago, Jonathan Brooks last year. The hope was that maybe you luck into having a third number 1 running back taken off the board. I think it's safe to say that's not going to happen this year. The question now becomes, where and what kind of stock does Jayden Blue have in the NFL draft? Is it even a stock relative enough to leave school after 3 years to go to the draft? That's kind of where I'm sitting at right now. 71 rushing attempts, 316 yards, 4.5 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. He's got 24 catches, 177 yards. Jerry, are we to believe that this is enough Jayden Blue to go to the NFL draft, or are we more in the situation where it's, listen, good year, good player, it might be better suited, especially in this running back draft, to come back or even return to college football for his NFL draft stock?
Look, the opposite of the Quinn Ewers discussion. Last year was not a good running back draft, right? And that's why Jonathan Brooks with an ACL was the first guy off the board, right?
Right.
That doesn't happen if in this NFL draft with Ashton Jeanty and Marion Hampton and some of those guys. This draft is extremely deep and talented at running back. So for me, and I know Jayden Blue can have a role as a boutique type of player out of the backfield with that speed in the NFL, and there's guys that are doing that at a high level in the NFL. But in terms of leaving school early and going in the NFL draft this year, man, that's a tough ask for me, because if you've watched enough college football this year, you could name 20, 25 running backs that you would take over Jayden Blue. Because the thing is, what's Jayden Blue's strength? Hands, out of the backfield, playmaker in space. He's had some drops this year too, out of the backfield, right? I mean, his runs, you said it, 4.4 carry. That's not a playmaker in the run game. So he's got to be a big-time playmaker in the pass game. 24 catches, 177, 3 touchdowns. He hasn't really been that. And so, I mean, I just think about the names. Ashton Jeanty's a first-rounder. Marion Hampton's probably a second-round guy. You have Caleb Johnson at Iowa is 1,144 yards. R.J. Harvey at UCF is a blur. He's a 1,000-yard rusher already. Taj Brooks at Texas Tech. I mean, Dylan Sampson at Tennessee. I mean, you could name 6, 7, 8 backs in the SEC right now,
right,
that will probably be drafted ahead of Jayden Blue. CJ, I mean, so Trevor Etienne is a better NFL prospect than Jayden Blue right now. I mean, so you just go down this list. Devin Neal at Kansas. I'll tell you a crazy one. Cam Scatabo at Arizona State, I would take over Jayden Blue in an NFL draft.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just that's where I come out on this, right? I mean, Le'Veon Moss at A&M is a better player than Jayden Blue. I mean, can anybody even argue that? I mean, you have Jaquindon Jackson at Arkansas. Is he a better NFL prospect than Jayden Blue? I mean, and so Jeremiah Love at Notre Dame. I mean, Ollie Gordon hadn't had a good year. Where's he at? Damian Martinez at Miami from Louisville High, the transfer from Oregon State. I mean, we talk about this being a deep NFL. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen at Penn State. Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson at Ohio State. I guess you know where I'm going, CJ. Where are you at?
I mean, it's more of the same, right? A couple names that you didn't mention, but Rocket Sanders, South Carolina, yes. Jaquindon Jackson, Arkansas. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, and that's where I'm at right now. Jayden Blue, not a bad football player.
No.
But I think there's a lot to refine in his game as a running back, right? And that's why I think you're seeing Trey Wisner have more success running the football right now, is because he's got patience, he's got vision, and that's big whenever holes are not immediately open, right? Jayden Blue's big thing, and this is kind of my critique of him this year, is gets the ball and go. That's his game, right? And that's great whenever you run as quick as he does and as fast as he is. That's the big strength of his game. But when you're a running back that has to run between the tackles, at times you got to sit back, relax, and let the holes and the mess clear itself out, right? I used to have a high school coach tell me all the time, run through the smoke. That means you don't see the hole immediately, but you know it's going to be there, and you trust the offensive line to get there. And at times, you just got to sit back, relax. And I thought Texas actually threw in a little wrinkle against Vanderbilt where they had him on the same side as the hole, and they ran a little, a sidestep counter to it. That's not unique to Jayden Blue, but what it does is slows him down and allows that hole to develop a little bit more. Again, all those running backs you mentioned, one thing's common throughout. They produce.
Yes.
45 rushing yards a game, that's not NFL draft worthy.
No.
And that's where we're at right now with Jayden Blue. And I know that out of the backfield, he's as good as it gets, right? In space, that's exactly where you want Jayden Blue. But those running backs all do the same. That's not a one-off thing with Jayden Blue. How does he help himself out over the next 4 games in the regular season?
And that's what we're here to talk about, right? What can he do? Look, if he decides to go pro, and look, I would not if I was him, but if he decides to go pro, he's going to test well. He'll probably run in the 4.3s, and he'll show really good hands out of the backfield in pro days and workouts in that scenario. But as far as the games go coming down the stretch, I think for all these guys who don't have who maybe his NFL draft slid this year, these last 4 regular season games are huge for them. And, you look at Florida and an Arkansas and a Kentucky and a Texas A&M. A&M is a high-level defense. Kentucky's got some high-level players up the middle on their defense. But he's going to have opportunities here. He literally needs to maximize every touch that's outside the tackles in the next 4 games for me. I mean, look, no fumbles, right? Because that's the other thing we didn't talk about. He did 2 fumbles against Mississippi State. He's seen his snaps decrease since then.
Yep.
I mean, that's the reality of it. So again, we talked about that with Quinn. Not the negative snapshot against Georgia, you have to overcome that. The negative snapshot right now for Jayden Blue is the 2 fumbles against Mississippi State, and his snaps have gone down since that period of time, and Trey Wisner's become the featured back. So he's got to overcome that. And that doesn't mean you can't be drafted, because Jayden Blue athletically is going to test off the charts. But he needs to make the most of his opportunities. And that's no turnovers. That's big plays in space in the passing game, because I still think his ticket in the NFL is not taking 12 to 15 handoffs in the NFL. It's 5, 6, 7, 8 handoffs. It's 5, 6, 7 targets out of the backfield. Now, he needs to catch everything thrown his way the rest of the season. He needs to protect the football, and he needs to have every game 2 big plays in space. He had one against Vanderbilt, right? He needs those space plays so they have those snapshots of what he can really be if they get him in an NFL team, program, training camp, and maximize what he's got. That's my opinion. I don't know where you're at, CJ.
I'm the same way. Again, I don't know what the draft grade would be right now, what that round selection, what that looks like for Jayden Blue. I know it's not as high as it should be. I know it's not as high as the hope was coming into the year.
Right.
And that's unfortunate. However, to your point, there's still 4 opportunities left in this regular season and then some. And he's going to test well, but he's got to maximize them. He's got to find a way to improve off of what has been, I don't want to call it lackluster, but maybe a little disappointing coming into this year, right? You got 4 fumbles on the year, 2 of them against Mississippi State, obviously. That can't be the case as Texas has its back against the wall moving forward. This has to be a moment where, as you said, the snapshot is a positive light. It's something that you look at and you say, wow, what a play. Because in a big moment like that, you're going to need a Jayden Blue because his skill set is so unique to this offense. It's going to be key. But right now, I think it's a day 3 late selection right now. And even at that, I think that's best case for the moment.
And that'd be if he just blows testing out of the water, like you would think. Because right now in this draft, production-wise, performance on the field-wise, he's just way too far. He's 182nd in rushing yards in college football. There's a number of quarterbacks that are ahead of that. Diego, Taylon Green,
right,
Jalen Milroe. I mean, 3 quarterbacks in the SEC off the top of my head. So 182nd in rushing. That means there's 165 running backs in college football that have better rushing production than you do.
Yep.
That's a tough spot to say I'm going into the NFL draft because a lot of those guys above you are going to be in the same NFL draft. And now he's got a special quality. He's got speed and elite speed and really good hands, but he's had some drops this year. He has got to make game-changing plays the last 4 weeks because the one thing of Marion Hampton, and look, he's not going to be drafted this high, but I'm just saying, as Cam Scatabo, let's say Scatabo, okay, who's going to go over 1,000 yards for Arizona State, maybe like 1,200 yards this season. He had 270 rushing yards against Mississippi State. Those guys are going to watch the same film. Cam Scatabo can run the ball between the tackles, is tough. He's got great balance. He's a good blocker. He can catch the football. But he doesn't have the edge, explosive playmaking ability of a Jayden Blue. So how does Jayden Blue start to work up boards against all these guys who are so productive? He's got to make huge plays coming down the stretch. Huge plays in the last 4 regular season games, hopefully a college football playoff game, maybe an SEC championship game. He's got to make the explosive big plays because the other guys have got him on production and consistency and ability to run the ball in between the tackles.
Yeah. Last point on this is it's great when you run for 125 and 3 scores against ULM. But when you're not trusted to have a touch or a rushing attempt against Georgia, that's kind of where those lines get blurred again if you're Jayden Blue. Yeah. And again, 4 opportunities in the regular season, and then who knows what happens in the postseason. Got to make the most of that. This stock can certainly rise, but 45 yards a game, that's not necessarily what we expected coming into the year, and that's not going to be beneficial to the draft stock. But a hot topic, and fortunately for Texas fans, it's one in which you'll get to hear a lot about Texas players over the next couple of months. So that's exciting in its own regard. But that'll do it for today. A little special edition weekend conversation about Quinn Ewers and Jayden Blue, NFL draft stocks. For Gerry Hamilton, I'm CJ Vogel. This has been On Texas Football. Welcome.